Welcome everybody into a very special edition of Nerd Sesh, our NBA Draft live stream. We are joined already by Jason Timpf. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we will be joined soon by Colin Cowherd. We will be live throughout the entire lottery, but of course, we start with the number one pick, where it has been presumed for quite some time now that Victor Wembanyama will be selected, a generationally great prospect. And Jason, I just want to start with this. What do you consider reasonable expectations for rookie Wemby?
First of all, it's good to see you boys. I appreciate all the really hard work you guys have been doing on the draft. As soon as the trophy was hoisted, I skipped town for a week, and I appreciate that I had the flexibility to do that because of you guys and the hard work you do on the draft. And I'm excited to hear all your thoughts on the rest of the picks down the draft as well, because especially after we get outside the top three, I'm pretty far out of the loop on some of this stuff. With Victor, you know, it's interesting because everyone is talking about him as this all-time great prospect, and he certainly is. But I kind of look at it from two perspectives. There's an extraordinarily high ceiling with Victor, obviously, but there's also this obnoxiously high floor. And I think that's what makes him super unique compared to recent draft prospects. Like, oh, is he better than Anthony Davis? Is he better than Kevin Durant? Or is he better than LeBron James? Maybe not in terms of the long-term capability, but he certainly has the safest high floor of any of those guys. Because from the second he sets foot on an NBA court, he's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 stretch fives in the league. He's already, I was watching a bunch of film on him guarding and pick and roll this morning. He's already just an incredible pick and roll defender in terms of his ability to dissuade pull-up jump shots up at the level of the screen. He's going to probably be the first guy in the league who doesn't have to come up to the level of the screen to block a pull-up jump shot, which causes a whole bunch of problems for certain teams. His activity around the basket, he's competitive, he's physical. Obviously, he's going to fill out his frame. It's funny when I'm looking at these young players, I try to focus more on their strengths than their weaknesses, because even grown-ass men on NBA courts have weaknesses, so it's kind of unfair to be like, well, this 18-year-old has all these holes. But in terms of a reasonable expectation, there's no reason in the world why he can't, day one in the NBA, be an above average pick and roll defender, if not a good to great pick and roll defender, and a player that you have to guard in pick and pop situations at the 3-point line. And that just immediately gives you a great foundation. Obviously, the Spurs have a long way to go in terms of personnel around him, but he's a great foundation for what should be a fun and exciting young team next year.
Yeah, I think if you're looking from a numbers perspective, I don't think 24-10 is out of the realm of possibility for a rookie win. And I think you point to the floor, Jason. That's what I'm most excited about, is I think the transition for him is going to be not seamless, but it's going to be pretty easy compared to other guys. I think somebody like Paolo, like Melo, like LeBron, they're transitioning to the league, not dominating and taking over from day one, but I think he's going to be a really productive player from day one. Offensively, you talk about the floor spacing, the pick and pop game. You're going to have to respect him out from behind the arc. But something else that's really impressed me outside of the areas that you've already pointed to, Jason, the immediate all-around defense, the shooting, is kind of the playmaking too, man. If Wemby's killing you in that way, he's shown a real proficiency to attack double teams, to spot cutters, to play really fluid basketball within the flow of an offense and not really dominate the ball, you know, with the ball in his hands. He's not a pound the rock kind of guy. He can play within the flow of an offense. So something else that I think he's really advanced in that not a lot of people are talking about too is the playmaking ceiling that Wemby possesses. And he's already a really good decision maker and playmaker. I don't think the Spurs are a playoff team immediately. I think that's really high expectations. I think the Spurs are kind of a ways away, but I think Wemby is going to be pretty efficient and put up some really good numbers and be really well-rounded immediately in the league. I really do love his floor.
I think you guys both hit on the key point with the floor, because it feels like there is so much focus in terms of national media on these just absurd moments of basketball skill from Wemby. If it's him shooting step backs at his height or these one-legged floaters from three, just unconscious stuff, but also not the sort of practical skill set that makes him so great. Bottom line, I think we are looking at a guy who will be a top of the league kind of defensive weapon with his switchability, but most importantly with his rim protection at 7'4", with an 8-foot wingspan, with his timing and instincts and all those things. And then, as Jason said, that shooting ability. I do think, though, it's important to sort of set some expectations here, because you'll notice neither of you guys said immediate all-star. And I think there have been some conversations about Wemby that just sort of wander into the insane realm. And I want to reiterate that he may be one of the greatest prospects we've ever seen. He will not be one of the greatest rookies we've ever seen, because dudes don't come into the league like they used to. You're not looking at a David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Patrick Ewing, Akeem Olajuwon, right? A 4-year college product with that level of physicality in their frame. Wemby still needs to grow as a post scorer, as a post hub, which I think will be a defining factor in, okay, is this guy like all NBA level, hyper efficient pick and roll weapon, offensively dominant pick and roll defender, rim protector, or is he potentially best player in the world, kind of guy who can carry your offense, creating for himself as well? And then I think just the practicality of his ability to create from the perimeter. Again, he's a phenomenal shooting prospect, but only shot 27% from deep this season. And I think a lot of that is just because of shot quality. So he has these moments where you think, wow, that guy handling the ball as a shooter off movement looks like a wing, and he's 7'4". But he's going to have to be more consistent in some of those categories for it to be like a legitimately foundational piece of his game. But the shooting and the rim protection, I agree with you, Logan, the passing, all of that gives him a remarkably high floor and ceiling. Are there any concerns for either of you about Wemby as a prospect?
You know, the shooting thing you mentioned, I'm actually less worried about. And the way you broke it down, I thought was really interesting, Carson, because there's always a huge gap in player evaluation between highlight plays and like bread and butter. Mm-hmm. And I think that's honestly one of the big reasons why guys like Nikola Jokic went under the radar for so long in the league. Hint, hint, I'm talking about myself here. But the reality is like, yeah, he couldn't make a jump shot at an efficient level, but he shot 40% on uncontested jump shots per synergy. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the big things that stood out to me on tape is like, yeah, when guys close out at him hard and when he takes tough shots, like a lot of the Mets 92 possessions when they were like, oh, there's 5 seconds on the shot clock and none of us have anything going, throw it to Wemby and he'll throw something up. Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And because he's like a cheat code with his ability to get shots off. And that's the thing. Like there was a play going viral in the game they got eliminated the other day. In there, I think they got eliminated in the championship, if I'm not mistaken. But they did end up getting swept, I believe. But they were playing Monaco, and he's on the left wing, and it's a late clock situation, late second quarter. And he takes like this ridiculous crossover step back 3 and knocks it down. And you're like, man, that was incredible. And it's like, yeah, it's a rescue possession. It's a late clock situation where they threw him the ball 40 feet from the basket with 5 seconds left and said, make a shot. Now, as we talk about a lot on my show, like rescue possessions are an important way to bolster your offensive ratings. Usually the difference between a 108 offensive rating and a 117 offensive rating is like, it often cases the superstar's ability to go over and above what you expect to receive from your shot quality. But when guys disrupt his energy transfer, like the movement of his body from the dip up through the release of his shot, he tends to fall apart with his mechanics. But then when he's wide open, it feels like that thing's going in every single time. And so that to me is more about shot selection, shot quality. Over the years, you're going to be able to replicate the good process and avoid the bad process and turn into a more efficient player. Again, we're talking about a kid playing against grown men in Europe, and he was still at close to a point per possession, including passes and post-up situations. He definitely has a little bit of tunnel vision, but at the same time, he is capable of making those high-level reads when he needs to, and I think as he becomes more experienced, he'll get better and better at that.
I totally agree with you. It's absolutely a product of shot quality. He is a phenomenal shooting prospect. So difficult to legitimately contest at his size, off movement, just totally unique. All right, we are going to bring in Colin here as we continue to work our way towards the official moment that Wemby is selected. Colin, it is great to have you. How are you doing today?
Well, I just watched a 3-minute highlight package that I had not seen before of new Victor Wembanyama highlights. It's like a video game. His ability I said today that we got Porzingis in the league 8 years ago. The European 7'3" can slash, can hit a jumper. He doesn't have nearly the skill level of Victor Wembanyama. He has a cruder offensive game. But there are some elements here that we're seeing from European basketball players. They play against grown men. They come in pretty humble and mature. They can shoot jumpers. Jokic, Giannis, Kristaps, Wembanyama. When I watch him, one of the things that really jumps out to me is just how fluid it is. It's just a very easy. It's not a soft game, but it's pretty. It's a really pretty game. He'll make spin moves and have a little shoulder dip to kind of drive his position, but he's just so fluid. The game is, the great players make it look easy. Everything. To me, the ball's on such a string, the way he handles it. He's just a very fluid, natural basketball player, very comfortable on the perimeter, driving, transition. And sometimes you just need God's gifts. I mean, like I watched a couple of blocks on the perimeter here on this highlight package. Mm-hmm. It's just, he can, when you can be burned and block the shot. It's one thing to be burned and recover. When you can be burned and block a shot, be fooled. Some of that length is just, he's just a remarkable player. I said the other day, there's only 10 players since Magic, I believe, were not only consensus number ones, but had no red flags. Wemby, Anthony Davis, LeBron, Duncan, Robinson, Hakeem, Magic. I'm missing a couple. Tim Duncan, I think, where, like Wemby is thin. That's not a red flag. That's a developmental issue. Anthony Davis was thin in the waist. People thought, but if you watch him now, he's obviously the back, the shoulders. I don't really consider that a red flag. Ben Simmons was a consensus one, but was aloof, didn't make the tournament, couldn't shoot. It's hard to find people that said he was communicative or a leader. John Wall was a consensus one, a lot of turnovers, out of control, could not shoot. Those are great players. But I mean, a no red flag number one since Magic, I think Wemby's the 10th. It's just a remarkable rarity in this league for all the talent. And those 3 minutes of video I had not seen. It's just different. It's like LeBron's high school stuff. You're right. Like, okay, that's a grown man playing. He's a sophomore, junior in high school. Like, that doesn't look like other players.
No, he doesn't. I mean, he really is one of one within the scope of NBA history. The combination of, you mentioned, fluidity and offensive skill and shooting ability and the defensive potential at 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan. Like, there's possessions where he's targeted out of pick and roll, and he is just so incredibly massive that you can't offer any resistance. I think it's interesting that you came in talking about the sort of international flavor to his game and the comparisons to Porzingis and whatnot, because this is in some ways an interesting culmination of like the global takeover of the NBA that we've seen, where the last 5 MVP awards have all gone now to international players between Embiid, Jokic, and Giannis. And now we have this totally generational prospect who is officially being selected by the Spurs as we speak. What do you think that does for the health of basketball overall, Colin? Just this incredible blooming international group of players.
Well, Jason and I talked about this. I think it's good for the league. I think I'm old school, so I grew up with Bob Lanier and Kareem. I grew up with bigs, and I miss the layering. I miss centers. I grew up with Walton. I covered Arvydas Sabonis, so I like the layering. I'm okay with small ball. I don't want to see the whole league go small. I don't want to see every center marginalized. I think, first of all, these European players, because they play against older players in the European culture where you travel within countries on the train system, they speak multiple languages. They're, I think, more mature than our players. They come in hungry, humble, and loyal. I think they're likable players. They're not always the flashiest or the most dynamic, but I think they're mature. They're great players. They're good citizens. They have multiple skill sets. They're very layered. And I've always thought, guys, old school, I like size. I like size in the league. There's nothing against Morant and Rose and Wall. I understand it. They're dynamic. There's room for that too. But man, there is watching Jokic. I think Jokic and Giannis are going to go back and forth over the next 6 years, being the best Bird Magic, best player in the league for about 6 years, maybe 5. And then I think Victor's going to take it over.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is the evolution of the big man to be incredibly skilled, and that's what I think the international pool helps us with. It feels like every year we see prospects who are just inconceivably skilled all around at 6'9" and up, and we've got another one of those guys in this class, Jason, with Brandon Miller, who has been long sort of seen as the favorite for the number 2 pick to Charlotte. Now Scoot Henderson has started to really reemerge in those conversations. What do you think goes down with this number 2 pick?
Well, I have no idea what Charlotte's going to do. I know what I would do. I would take Brandon Miller. And a lot of it just has to do with my view on the archetypes of players. I think there are 5 core archetypes of players in the NBA. There are playmaking forwards, scoring forwards, hyper-athletic guards, your star centers, and then your unicorns, which are guys like, Giannis and Steph Curry, which don't really fit into any of those molds. And the hyper-athletic guard is, in my opinion, the least successful archetype of star that we've seen in the NBA, between Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, John Wall, that specific archetype of player. They almost always are bad defenders because they're relied on in large doses to create offense, and so they conserve energy on that end. When they conserve energy, they can be downright destructive to a defense because they don't have the length and athleticism with just their size and long arms to bother things even when they're being lazy. They tend to rely on their athleticism too much. So they're not gym rats. They're not good at polishing up their skill set because they have this superpower in their athleticism that allows them to beat their peers without having to work as hard as many of their peers have had to work. And so we've seen that archetype fail miserably time and time again. I should fail relative to the other stars at the top of the league. And the one guy you can point to who really kind of succeeded in that archetype in recent NBA history is Dwayne Wade. And a couple things. He's bigger than all of those guys. He's 6'4", built like a truck, and he was an outstanding defensive player. And those two things are what allowed him to kind of break that mold. And again, he's the exception that proves the rule. So to me, Brandon Miller, big scoring forward, spitting image of Paul George and some of the fluidity and length stuff. Only thing I don't love about him is his release is a little low, down on his head, which in the NBA, when guys are contesting shots, higher release points like Paul George, like Brandon Ingram, where they're a little bit more over their head, they're better at getting shots off over defenders. That's my one concern right now. But I think he's almost guaranteed to be a perennial 20-point-a-game guy plus for a long time in this league.
I think that's the best description I've ever heard by any analyst on the prototypes of players. That literally is as well done. You have been able to synthesize all my feelings for years on the air about Westbrook, Wall. I always say they're fireworks shows. They're spectacular, but then somebody's got to clean up the fireworks show. Who's the cleanup crew after with the turnovers, the no defense? But they are so alluring aesthetically, Scoot Henderson, that you fall in love with them. You can't, they're dynamic. I mean, I'm watching Scoot's highlight tapes. It's like, oh, I already like him. I've never dribbled a ball in the league. I'm already a fan. Guy shot 27% from threes. Like many of these, they're not polished. They can't shoot. He won't be a great defender. That's really well put. That is, a lot of the things, my son said one time, he goes, I wish vegetables tasted as good as chocolate. And I'm like, I know. And that's the problem is most stuff that's really bad for you, like ice cream, is fantastic. And you can eat the pint. Nobody eats a pint of broccoli. And in small doses, that point guard, when you don't rely on them, can be effective. But I mean, Isaiah and Steph Curry, guys, that's rare where you win a championship through a point guard. And those guys are, I mean, let's be honest, they're 2 of the top 15 players in the history, arguably, of the league. So I'm really interested, though, as we're going to watch this live, it'll be on the podcast. If Portland takes Scoot within a minute, Portland's going to go from we're not interested in any discussion of a trade to we're taking calls. I don't know what you do here. It's fascinating.
It is, Jason, really interesting. Go ahead, Logan.
Sorry, Jason, I think you do make an excellent point. If you look through the past 40 years of basketball, guys, Dwayne Wade is the only downhill rim pressuring guard. That's his first primary skill set that has ascended the mountain and climbed and won a title, not by himself, but almost single-handedly, right? He doesn't have the cleanup crew that Colin's referring to. He's got Antoine Walker and Shaq putting up 13 a night in the NBA Finals. Russ failed in the playoffs repeatedly, is one of the worst playoff performers in NBA history. Derrick Rose sadly gets injured. Ja has yet to do it too. I think that is the reason that you take Brandon Miller, is not only the ceiling too, but I think he immediately helps the Hornets in their deficiencies. One of the worst defenses in the NBA. Steve Clifford wants to get the Hornets back to being a really physical defense, and they were 29th in shooting last year. How do you maximize LaMelo Ball, one of the best young playmakers in basketball? You give him an elite spot-up shooter. That's exactly what Brandon Miller does immediately. So I think he's the right pick. I think he helps them immediately, but he also has a massive ceiling where I think he could be a lead star scoring wing.
And also,
and it
guys, it is Brandon Miller. So, and I'm watching highlights here. Guys, also, we've gone through back to the basket centers. We've gone to dominant wings, Kobe, Michael. We got into small ball, 3-and-D guys. Guys, the league is getting big, and Europe is part of it. I mean, to me, here's a long, great frame, going to put even more weight on. I look at Brandon Miller, and can we argue, and I don't know if this is right or I'm overreacting to recency bias, guys, but the Bucks were big. The Laker bubble team was big. Denver was big. The Raptors with Marc Gasol, Siakam were long. Are we moving out of small ball? And Europe's a big part of this. Victor Wembanyama is another player. Is it going back to more of a big league, but a highly skilled big league?
I tend to think that in general, as a society, we overreact the exception to the rule. It's like, for instance, like if someone said, oh, Denver won the title and they were awesome offensively, does that mean we don't need to guard to win? No, that's not what it means. You have to be able to guard to win. Like that, they were the exception. And the same thing goes with that Warriors team. I mean, Steph is literally the only player below 6'5" that's in the top 20 all-time NBA players. So maybe anything that he accomplishes, we should just throw aside as like a complete outlier, you know what I mean? And that's the thing. Like, yeah, they succeeded playing small ball. They had a 6'6" center. They played a 6'7" power forward, and like that worked because Andre Iguodala is one of the best perimeter defenders to ever play the game. Draymond Green is a defensive anomaly at his position, as one of the best defenders of this era, and Steph Curry is the best small player in the history of the NBA. And so, yeah, you're right. Like if you want to win today, you have to go with what has been reliably great. The best indicator of future performance is past performance, not just one specific thing that you cling to. And so another athlete that can help crash from the perimeter and grab contested rebounds, like that was an underrated part of that Denver team. It wasn't just Jokic bullying people inside. It's Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. jumping over the top of people. It's Bruce Brown jumping over the top of people. Perimeter size is massively important. And to the Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller comp, like that's the thing, is like Brandon Miller, you know, the worst version of this story is he's Andrew Wiggins. Like that's the worst version of this story. And Andrew Wiggins was the second best player on a championship team. The Scoot Henderson thing, like it's a huge wide range of outcomes. That doesn't mean he can't win or break that mold. But if he did, he would be the outlier, which as from the standpoint of a front office means that he's less of a safe bet than Brandon Miller is.
Right. And it's the multifaceted impact. And that's part of the value of this wing archetype over the dynamic downhill guard that we all agree on. Logan and I have both been believers that Brandon Miller should go second overall, and he does. And it's beyond just this incredible scoring upside, right? The flashes of playmaking, the versatile defensive impact. He's a better fit in Charlotte as long as they believe that LaMelo is a cornerstone piece for them long term. But now we do have this decision for Portland, which, as Colin mentioned, if they take Scoot, you got to wonder if they are simultaneously putting Dame over the edge to where he may actually ask out. Logan, I'll go to you first. What's your expectation for the direction that Portland goes here and organizationally?
If Portland has two brain cells to rub together, they'll deal Damian Lillard. I mean, I just don't understand going in on this core again. I just don't see a title window opening with anything that you can do with this pick. I don't see any stars available on the market that you can pair with Damian Lillard. Importantly, I don't see enough depth pieces to get this roster over the top. I believe in Damian Lillard. Let me make that clear. I think Damian Lillard is still one of the 10 best offensive players in the NBA. I genuinely believe that. I think he's an offensive engine. I think you can win with him as your best offensive player. But around him, you have to have a lot of pieces. I just don't see any area, any route for Portland to take this pick, to take their current assets and build a contending team around Damian Lillard. So I just think you're endlessly chasing your tail when the alternative to this option is to explore taking Scoot Henderson. You put him alongside Ant Simons, who I love. You put him alongside Shaedon Sharpe, who I love. You have a brand new timeline ready to go with all these young assets that you can build around and chase a title down the road, not chase your tail next season. So I think that's what Portland should do with the pick. Colin, what about you? What do you think Portland should do?
Move down one spot, take a forward Cam Whitmore, and get something for Scoot Henderson. It's not going to happen, and I know it, but they've been looking for a forward for 10 years. Listen, I think generally I'm a believer in get talent, figure the fit out later. It is different, though. This is not I said this today. This is not the Packers taking Jordan Love that ticked off Aaron Rodgers. Okay, that's a prospect that needed years. This is the Packers taking Justin Herbert, bigger, stronger, more dynamic. And then Aaron Rodgers going, timeout. Wait a minute, I'm not an idiot. What's going on? Here we go.
I gotta say, yeah. So the thing that bothers me with this whole, like, even the little dance that Dame is doing with the media and the dance that Portland's doing, where it's like, we might rebuild, we might not, like, we'll see. It's such horseshit to me, pardon my language, because, like, you weren't even close. You're not close. They literally, if you just took the minutes when Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons, and Jeremy Grant, their three best players, were all on the floor together this season, they had a negative point differential. They lost those minutes. You're not close. You're not one young player away. You're not one young star away. As a team, even just add Paul George to this roster and nothing else with no payment, and they still are a ways away. They're not big enough. They're not athletic enough. They don't have enough diversity in their shot creation. They are not close. And so I don't know what this dance is or what Dame is trying to prove to us, but it's like, dude, this ship has sailed. And you've paid your dues here. It's time for you to go at this phase in your career and allow your top-end ability, which is rare in the NBA, to be on display in the late rounds of the NBA playoffs. And the only way that's happening is if you go to an organization that is much, much closer to a championship than Portland is, and they are not close.
Yeah, and I also think you can't ignore that Portland is building a legitimately talented young core here. Like Shaedon Sharpe, I think, is one of the more dynamic athletes with an incredibly high shooting ceiling. Ant Simons, we'll see how much his attributes scale in a winning context, but a really dynamic pick and roll shot maker and shot creator. And now you have Scoot officially. The pick is in from Portland, who I do still believe is a tremendously talented prospect, one of the best versions of the sort of explosive downhill guard that we've talked about because of his physicality, his playmaking ceiling, and at the very least, his tools to compete on the defensive end. Colin, is there a situation for you now that they have officially picked Scoot and maybe this dance with Dame is going to have to reach some actual conclusions? Is there a spot for Dame that you could really see happening that you like?
Well, no, I mean, all their talent on this team now is in the same group, guard. It's what Golden State is in this situation now. We got Steph, we got Clay, we've got Gary Payton, Moody. Wiggins is obviously talented, but I feel like Golden State needs size and they've got too many guards. But my fear is Golden State, because they save money moving Poole for Chris Paul, will now re-sign Clay, and they'll pay the price on that within a year. Portland's got a lot of young talent, one old guard and three, now that they have Scoot, three younger players. What they need is a wing. And again, Lakers are big, Denver's big, Milwaukee's big. I'm with you guys. I think they waited too long to break up Dame and CJ McCollum. I mean, who were basically, it was a poor, I mean, I like CJ, but he was a poor man's Dame. No defense, smart offensive player. Dame's obviously better, but it was like, guys, you've got to get a wing. And they bounced around getting guys. And, you have to take Scoot if he's available at 3. It's what you have to do. He's the most, he's got the fewest flaws. I never worry too much about a guy that can't shoot. I mean, there's just, if you go look, I go to, draftnet.com a lot, and I'll go down and I'll look at all their strengths and weaknesses. And almost to a player, its weakness hasn't refined his shooting yet. Like, they're kids, like that stuff. Ray Allen didn't walk into this league and shoot like that. That's just not the way it works. And often the guys who are great shooters have to be because they're athletically limited. Like, that's what they work on. So, I mean, you've got to take Scoot. I mean, he's just too dynamic. But I just think the psychology of Dame after the first couple practices, it's like the stories about D Wade practice with LeBron, and by the second practice, he's like, all right, this is your team. Like, Scoot is going to just be dynamite. He's jet fuel. And you're going to see this very quickly.
He is, and you're absolutely right about the stockpiling in the backcourt here. It's just not a feasible roster to move forward with, and I think a Dame trade is going to be mutually beneficial to a team that wants to contend and can put together the package, because now you're just given even more assets to Portland to build. I mean, I think Miami, a deal with them would still be really, really exciting for both parties. All right, Colin, Jason, we're going to let you guys go now. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this with us. This was a ton of fun. And before we get to the fourth pick here, we're going to have a quick word from our sponsor.
Rent or own, everybody's got projects. Actually, the room I'm sitting in right now, we remodeled. You can't see it off to the right. It was about $1,000 job, but we had to make some fixes, and we did. With Angie, you can request quotes from multiple pros with just a few taps. Download the free Angie mobile app today or go to ANGI.com. Angie has cost guides that can show you what other people paid for the same size project. How cool is that? The pros in the Angie network are all locally based. Painting, remodels, cabinets, they specialize in all kinds of projects. Go to ANGI.com or download the free Angie mobile app today. Angie, your home for everything home.
All right, so Houston, the pick is already in for them at number 4. Logan, I know that you and I have both seen Amen Thompson as the sort of presumptive selection here, just being in a different class from everybody else in this draft. What would he bring to Houston if he is the pick?
Stability at the point guard spot, man. And that's really what this team needs. Two-way stability on offense and on defense. Kevin Porter Jr., I love him. I think he could be a great sixth man. I think he's got some room to grow. I don't think he's a lead decision-making point guard. I think Amen Thompson is that. And then you couple that with the athletic traits that he has, uber quick burst, crazy verticality. He's an insane athlete that can collapse the defense, put pressure on the rim. He brings stability, man. I think he's got a really high offensive and defensive ceiling, but I trust him as a decision maker, as a lead playmaker. Houston desperately needs a guy to come in and set the table. And then defensively, they need a lead point of attack guy, somebody who can shut stuff down on that end. And I think Thompson brings that immediately. They need stability. They need a new culture. I think bringing in Amen Thompson, and I trust Ime Udoka to take over the rest. I think he's the best player available, too. I just think it works. But he brings a lot of stability to a Houston Rockets team that's been pretty unstable since the departure of James Harden, man.
That's interesting. I don't know if stability would be the main selling point for me with Amen, just because I feel like there are still some things that he needs to work out. The most obvious one being the fact that his jump shot is mechanically broken right now and not effective whatsoever. But you are talking about a guy who at the very least can be that sort of lead playmaking presence that they desperately need. And they have officially selected Amen Thompson. Now, he does still have also some of that sort of overtime, free-flowing at times, almost chaotic vibe to his game. A lot of running in transition, playing with a pace that isn't really feasible at the NBA level. But man, you talk about totally unique athlete, super high two-way ceiling, incredible ability as a playmaker with all the passing angles he can see at 6'7", the velocity, the creativity of his deliveries. I just think he's a home run here. So as this Houston young core continues to develop, and that's now 3 top 3 picks in the last 3 years, as you see here, Amen Thompson, or top 4 picks, I should say, joining Jabari Smith and Jalen Green. How do you feel about that core in their future, Logan?
They've got a lot of room to grow, Carson. You know what I mean? I don't think this team is contending for a playoff spot next season. It's a lot about what I talked about earlier. It's first, we need to see a cumulative effort in terms of defense, man. Jalen Green does not want to defend, right? Does not want to play team basketball. Jabari Smith Jr. has the tools and showed flashes last season. Still not a great defender. Sengun, I don't know if he can be a long-term 5 with his limitations as a defender. So it starts with that end. And then, like I said, all of them playing together, man. In Houston, it did seem like a lot last year. Jalen Green could just take the rock, be a black hole. This is my game. This is my possession. This is my shot. I'm going to go out there and take it. They've got a nice foundation right now, Carson, but it's going to take, I'd probably say right now, another 2 to 3 years of development, of gelling together, of building and establishing a culture there before we see these picks paying dividends. I like a lot of the talent. I like Jalen Green and his scoring skill set. I like Amen Thompson. I like Sengun. I like Jabari Smith Jr., but all of those guys have clear holes and clear areas to improve. Most of that, like I said, being defense and cumulative just feel for the game and playing together.
Yeah, they're far away, and I think that Ime Udoka is going to bear a significant responsibility in terms of building a culture, establishing a defensive identity, establishing a team that can actually have more offensive direction, play more together, because they have felt like the AAU team of the NBA, and it has been a lot of that sort of directionless offense with skilled young players, but not manufacturing high probability opportunities. And bottom line, Jabari Smith is a guy who I think at his best needs shots created for him. I never viewed him as a Brandon Miller caliber of shot creator for himself. I don't think he has that level of advanced handle in his game. I didn't quite think he had that level of fluidity as a prospect. I think Miller is honestly a better athlete too. So he's always been to me a guy who has this incredible pure shooting ability, who, if he's totally dialed in with his athleticism and length, has a high two-way ceiling, but isn't just going to go out there like Paul George and dictate offense like that. So Amen, I think, can help him. And then Jalen Green, there's a lot of criticism about the style of basketball that he plays, but this was a second-year guy on the worst team in the league, and maybe he is partially responsible for that, but his ability to attack the rim and his potential as a pull-up jump shooter, all-around shooting weapon, there's just so much of like a Zach LaVine in there, who maybe isn't the epitome of winning basketball, but sure is talented. And you think with that scoring ability in the right situation, that's a star-level player. So I do think it's exciting. It's Tari Eason, another young guy who I really like, but we're going to have to see the Rockets improve as an organization and actually develop Amen properly and not let this turn into a situation where they just keep getting these blue chip talents and things aren't progressing as you would like. So Detroit already has the pick in, Logan. Where do you see them going here at number 5?
I would take Cam Whitmore here. I just think in terms of complementary skill sets, he fits better than anybody else on the board. He's explosive. He's great at attacking closeouts, and he's a better perimeter shot maker than like Ausar Thompson. So I think he just fits a little bit better alongside Ivy and Cunningham. I think he's going to be a plus defender. They need defense too. Honestly, I would just go front court here. A guy who can slot in at 3, 4, 5. I wouldn't be mad at Whitmore, Walker, Thompson. But I just think in terms of what they can do right now, Whitmore fits a little bit better. And it's just a scary, scary athlete, man. I think he's the best athlete available. And that's the selling point about Whitmore and why I would take him here at 4.
He might be the best athlete available. You don't see 6'6", 235 with 40-inch vert and legit explosive quickness very often. Like, he is a downhill freight train who can posterize you easily. And with his spot-up shooting ability, with some of the creation off the dribble, his step-back shooting and whatnot, his transition prowess, there's a lot of intrigue with Whitmore. I think his ideal role is going to be like mostly spotting up, close out attacking, and then we'll see what ceiling he can reach defensively. I do not view him as a primary ball handler. I mean, he was not effective out of pick and roll. I believe 28th percentile there, not overly developed as a playmaker, doesn't have a ton of that creative craftiness to his game as a scorer, which is not what Detroit needs. They already have Cade and Jaden Ivey, so that would make sense. I would really like Jarris Walker too, though. I just think he's a better all-around prospect, meeting that front court need, immediate high two-way value and offensive versatility. But it's Ausar Thompson who the Pistons end up taking. To me, the best prospect on the board, number 5 on my big board. I know you were not quite as high on him. Not as intuitive, though, maybe, just because he's not a primary ball handler, but he's a real secondary ball handler to me with his playmaking chops. What's your take on this pick?
That's what stood out to me, Carson, in comparison to Amen with Ausar's game that I really like. I trust Ausar to be a complementary piece from off the jump. A lot of Amen's stuff is him dominating the ball, getting into the lane. And I'm not saying Ausar can't do that. I think he could be a primary ball handler one day, but he's shown that he can be conducive to winning basketball on the offensive end in terms of being a connecting piece, moving the ball around the arc, not dominating his touches. And again, Detroit needs defense. I think you can slot him in at the 3 alongside Ivey and Cunningham, and he's a plus defender, a real defensive playmaker. My one concern alongside them, man, Detroit does not have a lot of shooting. You've got Ivey, who struggles with his jump shot. I like him in terms of explosiveness as a ball handler out of the pick and roll. Is not a developed jump shooter, so he's not a plus alongside Cade. Jalen Duren is not a floor spacer, right? So your only plus in the starting 5 right now, if things stay the same, is Bogdanovich. I like him a lot, but you just don't have a whole lot of shooting around 2 ball-dominant guards, which is how I think you maximize those guys. And then I am concerned with Ausar. This isn't going to be an issue in Detroit because you have 2 primary ball handlers. One Ausar's shot along with those guys, and then just creating for himself in the half court didn't show that he's a real dependable creator with a deep ball handling bag, but he's one hell of an athlete. He'll help on the defensive end. I just don't love the offensive fit as much as other guys.
Yeah, again, I'm higher on Ausar than you are. And I think the big distinction probably is that I don't think he's quite in a men's class as a playmaker, as a pick and roll facilitator. He wasn't quite as efficient as a finisher around the rim. But I don't think he's that far off. And then the complementary skill sets, I do think if you're looking at shooting, it's a big question mark for both these guys. But Ausar is the one who shot 36% on spot up threes. A lot of those uncontested because people are afraid of him getting downhill. Sure. But more promising. I think mechanically he's more sound. And then defensively, all the athletic tools his brother does. And to me, is a better prospect there overall. So I do like this pick for Detroit because I also think, although things make it a bit crowded, Ausar knows how to play in an off-ball role. Transition, just inherently, he can be the grab-and-go guy, or he can be filling the lane, weaponizing his athleticism. But just playing with his brother so much, who is a bit more of that true point guard, he's an explosive cutter. He is willing to take those spot-up opportunities and can be a hell of a closeout attacker just with one of the quickest first steps I've ever seen from a guy that size at 6'7". I think it's a good pick. I think he's the best player on available. And I don't know that it's number 1 in terms of intuitive fit, but I also don't think it's something that can't work out here. Like, yeah, it would be nice to add more spot up shooting. Totally agreed there. But you ideally will have 2 dynamic pull-up jump shooters in your backcourt, and putting a guy who is dynamic for his athleticism alongside them, it could definitely work. And this is a team that is stockpiling some real talent now, man. We didn't see it this year because of Cade's injury. And of course, Ivey was just raw and had a real rookie season. But Detroit is building something really promising and impressive. So now we've got the Orlando Magic with their first of 2 lottery picks up, Logan. Both Thompson brothers off the board. Where do you think they'll go?
So in my mock, I mocked Ausar here. I thought he was going to be available with this pick. It's weird, man. The best three guys I think are available. I know I had on my big board, I had Wallace and George here higher at 5 and 6. The next three guys that I think are available, Whitmore, Walker, Hendricks, all don't really fit here. You know what I mean? You've got Wagner, you've got Banchero. So I think you go in the backcourt, man. Unless you think Whitmore is really that home run talent. I don't really know how they all coexist together, though. Maybe you go on Anthony Black here, Carson. What do you think about that, man? A lead ball handler, tall guy, can potentially be better than Fultz, Suggs, and Cole Anthony. Yeah. I like all those guys as a point guard by committee, but Anthony Black's a surefire decision maker, a great point of attack defender, and he's one hell of an athlete, too. You know, I question his scoring skill set, but when you've got two score-first wings like Wagner and Banchero, I think it could work. So I'd probably go Anthony Black.
Well, Logan, congratulations, because the Orlando Magic just did. And I do think it's the right pick here. I think that you're right about the front court talent that already exists in Orlando. That's just not a priority. A Jarris Walker or a Taylor Hendricks, especially those bigger kind of front court guys, when you already have Paolo and Franz, who are foundational pieces. And it is going to be interesting seeing how they balance the Fultz and Black dynamic, because there's a lot of similarities there. You have the athletic, very skilled playmaking, but non-shooting ball handlers. I think that Anthony Black is the kind of guy who long-term will surpass Fultz, even though I like Fultz a lot. I think there is certainly more potential for him to figure his shot out. It's below average right now. It is definitely a work in progress, but it's not broken. I think he's okay in spot-up situations. And then you're just talking about a 6'7" guy who has a really unique level of craftiness, of feel as a ball handler, and of playmaking at that height, right? The ability to make hook passes, to fit in these tight window bounce passes. It just really shines. And I think he will bring a lot of two-way value as well. He's a dog. He's a hell of a defensive playmaker. He's got good attributes there, good athlete. And long-term, Fultz is young enough to fit into this timeline conceivably, but you want a dynamic guard with real star upside in Orlando. I think that this is the right pick, and I think it's a very good one. I'm a big fan of Anthony Black. So now we've got the Pacers picking up at 7, Logan. Who are some of your favorite targets for them?
I don't want to jump the gun here. It seems like Indiana and Washington are going to swap these picks. I would have taken, I really like Jarris Walker to Indiana right here. I think he ticks a lot of their boxes. I think Walker's a perfect fit there, man. They didn't run a whole lot of pick and roll at Houston. I think Walker he was very efficient in those touches. However, I think he's going to be a amazing just screener threat in terms of picking and popping, picking and rolling. The shot isn't great yet, but he's shown he's got really nice touch. He can make difficult shots. I trust the shot coming along and him being a plus there. But defensively, this is a young team building around a new core, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they moved on from Buddy Hield and or Miles Turner long-term. So you've got Halliburton, Mathurin, and Walker as building block pieces, and I all think they complement each other. But defensively is where Walker shines. Over a steal and a block per game at Houston will help them immediately there as a playmaker, help side rim protector on the perimeter, on the interior. He can do it all defensively. So I love him. And then I think ceiling-wise, man, I comped him to Julius Randle. I don't love how Julius Randle plays basketball, but these guys share a lot of similarities in terms of just being Mack trucks that can get downhill really physically, but can also make these tough post shots and have a little bit of a perimeter game. So I think that's the right pick for Indiana, man. I think it's a match made in heaven, especially when you have a lead ball handler like a Tyrese Halliburton already.
Walker and Randall do also share at times the frustrating tendency to rely a bit too much on their skill and to not always impose themselves physically as much as they can. But bottom line is you can't teach 6'7", 250 with a 7'3" wingspan and above average quickness for that size. I think Walker absolutely makes sense here. You mentioned it. They already have their foundational playmaker in Tyrese Halliburton, who I think would be ideal for unlocking Walker because he doesn't have that level of fluidity and of on-ball creation of pull-up jump shooting, right? That's not the kind of prospect that you're getting in Jarris Walker. What you are getting is a guy who can be a great complementary piece, screening, attacking mismatches with his combination of physicality and skill. He is a legitimately good playmaker at his size, and then the defense is probably the main selling point. There's foundations of that higher level skill, the handle and whatnot, not a ton of breaking people down. He can be a bit out of control, but there's, I think, a floor here because of all of his different traits and potentially a star ceiling. That is not where the Pacers go, though, Logan. They take Bilal Coulibaly, who is Wemby's teammate with Mets 92. I had him at 14 on my big board. I'm just going to flat out say I think that this is a big reach. What's your take?
Reportedly, Carson, they're going to trade this pick to Washington, and Indiana is going to drop back to pick 8. God bless Bilal Coulibaly's soul. I wish him the best in Washington. They have yet to ever, make a player better. I mean, Washington is where NBA talent goes to die, man. I don't know. I applaud them for kickstarting their rebuild, for getting a asset in Jordan Poole, Tyus Jones, some guys who can play. It's a tough landing spot, man. So I'm nervous. I like a lot of Coulibaly's traits. He is a freak athlete, a guy who can be a dominant defender at any level as a help side rim protector on the perimeter. He's super long. He's got crazy bounce. He's an insane athlete, but he's pretty raw in every other area. Decent catch and shooter, shot those at a 36% clip last season. Handles a little loose. I don't really view him as a primary creator right now, but he's got a lot of room to grow. I think he'll be a plus defensively, and he's one hell of an athlete, but his offensive game is pretty raw. Like I said, man, I think Washington is just one of like the worst destinations for any rookie to go. So I wish him the best there if that's where he ends up and this trade goes through.
I think that's a misstep in the rebuild, man. And obviously Washington has been extremely active dealing KP and Beal, and today Chris Paul, and they end up with, I think it's 8 second rounders, 4 first round pick swaps, and of course Jordan Poole. Coulibaly is far away, and I think he's a guy who got better as this year went along. His role and his productivity increased. I think he's going to be an awesome defensive prospect, like crazy length, 7'3" wingspan at 6'7", really good feet, plays hard, has a good frame. But I just think for top 10, a bit too raw, and he's not 19 yet, but even in his better role, I think falls too much into that specialist archetype, where offensively, I mean, he's athletic, he's an aggressive finisher, he'll be good in transition, he can be a closeout attacker, and the shot really has to pan out for him to work at the next level as a plus NBA player, which the sample size, mechanically, it's okay. He was 36% from deep, 63% from the line overall. I'm not totally sold on that yet. And then I don't see the higher level traits. I don't see the playmaking. I don't see any offensive polish at all. And I'm just surprised. I feel like there are really good wing forward prospects who bring two-way potential, but are more multifaceted, like a Taylor Hendricks with his versatility offensively, a polished post-up game already, the pick and pop stuff, who can be a legit plus defender. Walker, we've already talked about. Very interesting selection from Washington, and I do not like it, if I'm being honest. So you mentioned the flip here. What do you see happen with this 8 pick?
Yeah, I think Jarris Walker is going to go here. I think he's the best fit, and I think they go with him. Like I said, man, great defender, going to be amazing in that off the bat, but he's got room to grow potentially as a playmaker, as a closeout attacker. I think he's going to be great out of the short roll as a screener. I will say, Carson, the most shocking thing to me right now is that Cam Whitmore is still available on the board. I mean, I've seen mocks that projected him as high as 4, and to basically every team throughout here. Utah is going to have one hell of a decision on their hands because I think they need a point guard. I think that's where they should go. But do they value getting a dependable playmaker more than getting the best player available, which I still view as Cam Whitmore. I'm stunned that he is still available, or is probably still going to be available here at 9.
I mean, this is an absolute fleecing from my perspective. What was the market for Coulibaly that would suggest that he was going to go 7? I mean, that feels like some very almost, dare I say, unfair exploitation of the Wizards, Logan. I mean, give the little guy a chance, for God's sakes. They had 17 years of Ernie Grunfeld, and they didn't get a single first-round pick for Bradley Beal or Kristaps Porzingis, and now you're just like, oh, you like that guy? I think we're going to take him. That's crazy to me, man. Yeah, we talked about the fit. I think it is ideal for Indiana. I think they are getting the best player available. I think they are getting a guy who meets a ton of their needs, and again, who has both a higher floor and more upside to me. Coulibaly at this point is straight line drives, spot up threes, and very good defense. That's just not a top 7 pick when the shot isn't even a solid plus that you can bet on. I'm really surprised by this. And it is Jarris Walker, who the Pacers take at 8. Home run to me, man. That's great value. I had him as my number 6 prospect. You're able to move out of that. You're able to add value. Really nicely done by them.
Yeah, dude, they're bullying little brother with this pick, man. Washington, they put him under their head and they put him under their arm and they rub their head, dude. That's a fleecing. I did not expect Coulibaly to go that high, and I'm really interested as to whether, I mean, Carson, their best 3 players from last season, all gone. Beal traded to Phoenix, Kristaps traded to Boston, Kyle Kuzma opts out of his player option, is becoming a free agent. Does Coulibaly start off rip?
He's not ready. Dude, I mean,
I don't think so either.
Was like barely playing early on in LNB Pro A. Like, he is not there yet. This guy is a project. So the Wizards, man. I mean, how do you feel about the entirety of this week, what they've done, big picture? They have direction now, but how have they handled this all in totality?
Oh, in totality, I mean, this is just a complete negative. The only good trade that I can point to that Washington has done in the past few years was just getting Russell Westbrook off of their hands for Kuzma, Trez, and KCP. They completely sold the Beal deal by
today. That was good value for him, right? He had no use for them.
No, that was a good deal, 100%. CP getting Jordan Poole and a first-round pick, but I just mean in terms of timeline, foolish. I mean, you get way less value than you could have gotten for Beal 2 years ago when this was clearly the direction that we were always going to head. For Porzingis, I mean, pennies on the dollar. You don't have a whole lot of flexibility with him because he could have opted out of his contract. I think the Washington Wizards are going to be the worst team in the NBA next season. I mean, hey, at least they've got Johnny Davis, though, right, Carson?
Yeah, man. Something to hang their hat on. Good old Johnny Davis. I agree with you completely. Like, this was the basketball purgatory that they doomed themselves to, where they didn't have a top 7 pick in all these years with Bradley Beal, where they made a total of 1 playoff series post John Wall, where they were politely dismissed of in 5 games. And so it is good that they're pivoting, but it's just way too little, way too late. And this feels like another misstep to me. So you mentioned the Jazz at number 9, having this decision now. Cam Whitmore on the board. I do think he's clearly the best prospect available. At the same time, he was number 9 on my big board, just because I didn't see from him some of the consistent defensive production that there was from, for example, a Jarris Walker or a Taylor Hendricks, actually, who is still on the board, who I like a little bit more than Whitmore. Whitmore has this eye-popping athleticism. He has this shooting ceiling. But again, not being quite the same level as a defensive prospect to Walker or Hendricks, and not having the high-level offensive creation, I think made me a little bit lower on him than most. What do you think they do here? Is it Whitmore? Is it Hendricks? Is it your boy Cason Wallace, who you had mocked to them?
I would still take Cason Wallace. He's the best available on my big board. I absolutely love his game. And I love his fit with the Utah Jazz as well, man. You've got shooting here. Lauri Markkanen and Kelly Olynyk, they love running 5 out. You've got money secondary ball handlers and creators in Sexton and Clarkson, man. I just think that this is an ideal fit for Cason Wallace and for the Jazz. He is a veteran decision maker with veteran instincts. He plays good winning basketball, and he will from off the bat. Great out of the pick and roll. Has a little bit of an in-between game with a nice floater. He's a good shooter. He can relocate off ball, and he plays within the flow of the offense. He's also a plus point of attack defender, a little bit undersized, but he's got a great wingspan. He's got great effort and great hands on that end too. But Utah really needs a point guard, and so again, I think he's a veteran decision maker off the bat that plays winning basketball, and I think he's got a higher ceiling as a potential star for this team. So, yeah, Whitmore's very intriguing, but I think Wallace is the better fit, and I think he's got one of the highest floors out of any prospect in this class.
To me, if you're Utah, you're going best player available. You have one foundational piece in Lauri Markkanen, who I just think had a phenomenal season, should have maybe been all NBA in my opinion, like remarkable offensive efficiency and production in so many different phases. Outside of that, you can like Sexton, you can like a Jordan Clarkson. All those guys have their significant flaws. And so if you think Whitmore is the best guy, you take him. I do think Taylor Hendricks is the best player available at this point, though. And I think this is a guy who was an extremely efficient offensive player at UCF, so admittedly facing lower level competition than a lot of these other guys, but a damn good shooter at 6'8" with a 7'1" wingspan. So you're talking about a high release point, difficult to affect, 39% from deep, 78% from the line, does not need a lot of room to shoot the ball efficiently, contested against defenders. The pick and pop game, very effective when deployed. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a 93rd percentile post score. He has the combination of that face-up game, shooting over people with a little bit of that body control and quickness to get around some guys, and then like a legitimate post bag. He's got a good hook. So I just think offensively, super complementary skill set, and then defensively, to me, a tier 1 prospect in this class. 7'1" wingspan, can affect so much with his length, moves really well on the perimeter, agile, high motor, and just a multi-positional defender, super switchable out of pick and roll. I think the kind of guy who is just going to thrive in NBA basketball. He has so many of the traits that you look for that translate. If I were Utah, that's where I would go with this pick. Also, really good defensive playmaking from Taylor Hendricks, like some of that real help side shot blocking. Still don't have word on if the pick is in yet for Utah. So how do you feel about where they're trending organizationally? Like, this was a team that was very competitive for so much of the season, then fell off almost willingly towards the end. How important is this in improving their stature, and how optimistic should Jazz fans be right now?
The one thing about Utah, man, is they were one of the best offenses in the league last season. Granted, that was with Conley at the guard spot too. This is a team that just every night when you were watching Utah basketball, it felt like they could be primed for an upset. Like, this is like much like the Oklahoma City Thunder, where they're not legitimate playoff contenders, where I think they're going to go out and they're going to win a round in the playoffs, but they're a competitive team night to night because their offense doesn't stop. They had a lot of shooting, and then defensively always gave a ton of effort. So yeah, organizationally, I like the way they're trending. I just don't think they have the requisite talent to really be competitive, right? Markkanen's kind of their only building block piece, I would say. I like a lot of the guys here, right? Like, Clarkson's cool. Sexton is cool. And what I meant with them in the context of with Cason Wallace is I think they're great in the role of attacking closeouts and being secondary guys to him. But I don't love them in terms of being building blocks. So I'd say Markkanen, and then Walker Kessler, I think, is a beast. I think he's going to be one of the top 15 centers in the league one day. I like where they're trending, but they need a lot more talent to be really, really competitive.
So they do take Taylor Hendricks. That is a good front court, dude. I mean, you mentioned the value of Kessler, who is as close to a building block as they have outside of Lauri Markkanen, a guy who I think projects as one of the best rim protectors in the league. He's already not far off, and an efficient finisher around the rim. Really good young player. Hendricks is good. dude. Like, this is a guy who I believe in translating, and I think is a guy who, although it's a big front court overall, I don't have a problem with that because it's a fluid front court. Like, he can guard multiple positions. Markkanen is a guy who we saw, obviously, offensively, can fill a bunch of roles for you, is a great floor spacer, one of the best spot-up shooters in the league. I think that Hendricks will also be awesome out of pick and pop and spot-up situations. But both those guys can guard in space as well. So Kason Wallace would have been cool. I agree with you. He's as close to Mike Conley as you can get with a rookie, just with his decision-making, how he controls the game. But to me, take the best player available. That's Taylor Hendricks. That is a job well done by the Utah Jazz. So Cam Whitmore continues to fall. And Logan, like, if you're the Dallas Mavericks, do you even think about it? The pick should already be in my opinion. Who do you see them going with? I think Cam Whitmore is a really good option for them.
So apparently we're going to get a deal. I think Dallas and OKC are going to swap here. I wanted Taylor Hendricks to go to Dallas immediately because I think he was the best winning prospect available. And that's what you really need if you're the Dallas Mavericks. You've got all the offensive creation in the world. Now you need complementary pieces. You need guys who play defense, who can shoot the hell out of the ball, off ball, and can just complement Kyrie and Luka Doncic. I guess Whitmore would be the pick, but I don't know. I don't love it, man. You need winning assets right now for Luka Doncic, and I'm not really sure who's available that ticks that box, Carson.
So trying to figure out what's going on with this trade. Sham says Dallas is trading Davis Bertans and Kason Wallace at number 10 to OKC. So that's interesting. OKC is going to send number 12 and a exception to Dallas. Yeah, I don't love that for Dallas. I think you should be sitting and taking the guy who you feel is the best player available. I don't know that they're in a position to be passing on premier talents. Now, I understand them wanting to create more flexibility, which makes a lot of sense. The Bertans contract is a bad one. You want to be off that. So it'll be interesting to see where they go at 12. I really thought Cam Whitmore, although he's not the most refined, was an opportunity to add a athletic, shooting, potential positive impact two-way wing, which is what their roster has clearly needed. So Kason Wallace to OKC, what's your take on that, Logan?
I wanted a Wallace to go to a spot where he had maybe a little more of a runway or a path to being a starting guard, but immediately Wallace might be like one of the best six men in basketball, right? He's not going to start over SGA or Giddey. You've got your two ball-dominant lead guards there, but Wallace is going to be a money decision maker off the bench and in spots when you need him. So, I mean, I think Oklahoma City is good on guards, on ball handling, on playmaking, on decision-making for years to come. I question the fit, but I mean, it's not like Oklahoma City has a clear distinctive need. They're stockpiling the best young talent in basketball, right? You've still got Jang, you've still got Poku, you've still got Chet Holmgren coming back next year. So they really could have just picked the best of the bunch. And if they think that's Kason Wallace, I think it's a good pick. Not that they needed more ball handling, but like I said, man, you now have 48 minutes of a dependable playmaker and decision maker every minute of basketball during a game. So I was going to love wherever Kason Wallace went because I absolutely love him as a prospect. But it's an interesting spot. I wanted him to start, but I like it for Oklahoma City, man. He's a really good prospect, and they've got like all the ball handling and playmaking they need.
It's super interesting that they were so enthusiastic about this, that they wanted to move up to get him, because they already have two quasi-primary ball handlers in SGA and Josh Giddey, right? Both guys who are already having to share those duties, but want to run a lot of pick and roll, are best with the ball in their hands, making decisions for their teammates, getting buckets for themselves in the lane. Kason is a guy who can play off ball because of his value as a spot-up shooter, is going to have a positive two-way impact, but I do feel that a lot of his value comes from playmaking, decision-making with the ball in his hands. If they really like him, though, it does make sense because they're in best player available mode, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, they've been stockpiling talent at every position. The Bertans contract, they're moving towards making that legit playoff push. But right now, I mean, they really couldn't care less. Like, the only two players who they're paying big money at all are SGA and Lou Dort. So that Bertans contract, by the time they're really having to pay guys and potentially contend, is going to be a non-issue. So I have no problem with this for the Thunder. I think that Cason Wallace is a really good, really high floor prospect, and nobody necessarily meets a need for them, but he's a guy who I'm confident in being good and playing winning basketball, right? They've taken their big swings on the Pokus and the Ousmane Jangs and these guys who are so incredibly raw, have these really cool moments, but you don't know if it's going to materialize. I think Wallace is one of the highest floor guys in this class. So we've got another pick to get through until we see what the Mavs do at 12, now having moved, and that is the Orlando Magic, their second pick of the lottery at 11. What do you see them doing, Logan?
I wasn't anticipating Cam Whitmore being available at 11. I think no-brainer. You just take him. I originally, we had mocked Grady Dick to the Magic at 11. They desperately need shooting alongside Banchero, alongside Anthony Black, right? These alongside Wendell Carter Jr. Not great floor spacers. You just want to open up the floor and let them operate. You do that by adding perimeter shooting. Grady Dick is a lights-out shooter and great role player. But screw getting a role player, man. You could be getting the whole package in Cam Whitmore. I don't really care about how the fit works. Bring him off the bench, man. Like, I don't think he's going to start because you have Wagner and Banchero who are building blocks of this franchise. But Cam Whitmore's the best available. You're not in a spot where you're really picking for need because you're that competitive. Go out and get the best guy available, man, Cam Whitmore. Even if you bring him off the bench, he's still a great defensive wing, super athletic with a ton of upside, right? Like you said, I don't really ever see him being a primary ball handler, Carson, but I can see him being a decent creator off of the dribble, a guy who can get downhill. Like, he's shown flashes of that creation off the dribble, but I think he's the best player available, so that's who I'd go at 11.
I totally agree. I thought he was the second best option for them at number 6 after Anthony Black, and I think he fits better alongside Paolo and Franz because although he is a big guy in terms of being 235, he's not like at all going to be a lumbering presence in the front court, right? I mean, this is a dynamic athlete, doesn't need to have the ball in his hands a lot to be at his most effective, does have real star potential because of the potential ceiling with athleticism and shooting and defense all coming together. In Orlando, dude, I mean, if you look at this foundational core for the future that they're now working with, Fultz has legitimately begun to thrive as a playmaker and is perfectly good scorer of the basketball when he's healthy with his ability to get to the rim, some of the mid-range shot making. I think Franz Wagner is one of the best young players in the NBA, period. Like a really advanced playmaker, awesome shooter, versatile defensive piece. Paolo, of course, one of the more productive rookies this century, a guy who we'll see how consistent he can become with the perimeter game, the consistency of his jump shot, but certainly has shown the flashes of the higher level offensive skill and then has this special athleticism, this playmaking ability you don't often see from 6'10 guys like that. Wendell Carter Jr. is just a really good do-it-all center. Like, you add Anthony Black and Cam Whitmore into the mix from this class. Is there a team in the league? Everybody talks about the Thunder, but with a brighter future than the Orlando Magic?
Not many, Carson. I mean, I think they're 2 years away, man. I think this year is like get us ready, get prepped. Let's go do this thing. Let's gel together. And then I think next year you're looking at a team that will actually be in playoff contention. I do think they've got one of the brightest futures in the league, man. They're a legit contender. So, I'm kind of scratching my head at this one, man.
So they're not going Cam Whitmore. Apparently they're going to go with Jet Howard out of Michigan at 11. I think it's a reach, Logan. What's your take on this?
I hate this pick, dude. I had Jet Howard as like a late first round guy. I think this is my least favorite pick in the draft. And I was all for them going out and getting shooting, right? When I projected Grady Dick, and Jet Howard is a pure shooter, right? He shot 38% off the catch, 37% overall from deep, 38% on pull-ups, shot 37% off screens. So you're getting a guy who you're going to be able to weaponize in a ton of different actions, off screen, off spot ups, off DHOs, right? And he's just going to be able to pull. Jet Howard is really, really limited in basically every other aspect of his game. He's not a great athlete. He's pretty slow-footed. I think he's a guy that you can attack on defense. On offense, he's not a great creator with the ball in his hands, doesn't have a crazy handle, doesn't create a bunch of separation, doesn't have great change in pace. I think he's pretty one-dimensional, like just as a straight-up shooter. There's always a place for guys like that in terms of the league, but my favorite role player in that department in this draft was Grady Dick. So, one, I don't think they took the right floor spacer, and then two, I think they completely reached. This is a guy I thought was late first round. So, this is my least favorite pick in the draft so far, man. I think this is a kind of a whiff by Orlando.
I don't get it. I think, again, Whitmore is a different level of a prospect to me. You don't see athletes like that often. So to have any level of offensive skill, shooting ability, which he legitimately does, very intriguing to me. And I totally agree with you. If you're looking in the complementary offensive, really good shooter archetype, I just think Dick is a better prospect. Like, not only is he this phenomenal all-around shooter, Grady Dick was a 97th percentile pick-and-roll ball handler. He's a guy who can legitimately make good reads out of the pick and roll, who can make a lot of passes there, who's a really good pull-up shooter with a nice step back. Like, he doesn't have that star potential. He lacks that high-end burst. He's probably not going to be a plus defender at the next level. I just don't think that he has the physical tools needed, although I do believe he has the mentality. And to me, it's like Howard is just sort of an inferior version of a lot of those things. Like, he has the playmaking to some extent. And yeah, he is a good shooting weapon, but he's also not a guy who I think is going to be a real plus defender. He's also not a guy who shines athletically. And I just don't think he's quite as good at the defining traits as a Grady Dick is. So this move doesn't make sense to me, man. And I'm starting to become perplexed by the Cam Whitmore fall. I did see earlier today that he was possibly trending towards the number 10 pick. The Mavericks, according to Shams, are taking Derek Lively at number 12. I think that's just a bad pick. I understand that it is a need. I understand that this is something that has been consistently mocked because of how bad Dallas was in the defensive front court and just their overall big man situation, presumably letting Christian Wood walk. They were 7-15 post All-Star break. They were number 26 in defensive rating in that stretch. Man, I just don't think Derek Lively is the guy. This was a very highly respected high school prospect, top 3 guy in his class, and he does have some really impressive traits. 7'1" with a 7'7" wingspan. That is elite size. He is a massive target around the rim. He has soft hands. He has above average finishing touch. He is coordinated. He was a very efficient pick and roll finisher, 97th percentile actually. And like, he's a solid playmaker for his position. He has this really impressive shot blocking ability, 2.4 per game in just 20 minutes. But I don't know that he's the most refined all-around defender. And I think more importantly, offensively, he is not even replacement level yet to me. Like, yeah, he's a really good athlete, but he has no ability to get himself a bucket out of the post. He doesn't have that aggressive killer instinct as a finisher around the rim. In traffic, he can legitimately struggle. He'll pass up open shots. You've seen very brief flashes of the jump shot from him, but nothing that I would rely on. 60% from the line, 15% from deep this past season. There is just better prospects. You can find a center off the scrap heap who this year will be like a Derek Lively II, right? Like the equivalent of a JaVale McGee kind of guy a couple years ago. Legitimately, I don't think Derek Lively is going to be an upgrade from that this year. Long term, maybe. But if you want contributors in your front court right now, two-way guys, why isn't it Cam Whitmore? Even Grady Dick, he's not bringing the defensive value, but he immediately is going to fit in off ball offensively, give you playmaking, all around value. I know you're not a big Lively guy either, but this to me just feels like almost the inevitable misstep that everybody's been talking about in the entire time. I've been like, I understand it's a position of need. It's not worth spending a top 10 initially, now 12 pick on, but what's your take?
Especially with Whitmore on the board, dude, in terms of playing right now, in terms of upside, I just think Whitmore clears, dude. And I think you make a lot of good points. One, I think you can find a replacement level big better than him immediately. I wondered, honestly, if Lively was a G League guy off rip. I think he's very raw. Defensively, in the long term, you're looking at a guy who could be an elite rim protector, but he averaged 5.3 fouls per 40 minutes. And offensively, Carson, I don't know, you give him a lot of credit. I think he's a lot more raw than even you give him credit for, dude. He shot 13 of...
Here's all I'm saying. He is good at the basic big man roll to the rim stuff because he's massive and because he's got like good hands, pretty much. That's not a top 12 pick.
I don't think so either. He shot 13 of 25 on layups last season, 3 of 10 on hooks. He was 2 of 13 as a jump shooter, man. Like, you're just looking at a guy who, one, like, not even finishing against NBA level bigs. This guy can't finish against smaller guys that switch on to him. The Dallas Mavericks, Carson, might have just lost themselves Luka Doncic, man. Like, that's the ramifications of this pick, dude. Like, I don't know. They really needed to hit this one out of the park and build a contender immediately. And they may have just set themselves back. I like Derek Lively's potential down the road in the future once he has time to develop. But I don't like this as a guy who can play immediately right now. I think there are better options. I don't like this pick.
I just think about the sort of dudes who we see get moved for chump change. Like, and who end up not even playing meaningful minutes. Is Derek Lively next year going to be better than Mo Bamba? Is he? That is a genuine question, Logan.
Is Derek Lively going to be better than Moses Brown, man? Like, I wonder if that's the tier that we're in, dude.
Yeah, because, Mo Bamba can space the floor. No, I honestly don't think that's unreasonable to say. Like, man, I get the position of need. I get the special physical traits, but
would you sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
Would you have liked Chris Murray more for them?
I would have liked Chris Murray more. I think Chris Murray is a way better basketball player right now. And I think for Dallas, that is more important than most situations because they're not exactly in a spot to be investing in projects. Chris Murray may be 23 when the season starts, but he's going to shoot the ball well. He's going to be able to attack mismatches at his size as a bigger forward. He's going to defend multiple positions at a high level. He's going to screen well. He's going to make good decisions within the flow of an offense. All things that I think are valuable for a team that is trying to push towards the title, right? Like, they had maybe the most pressure on them of anybody in this draft. And I do see the value in them clearing up cap space, especially if they were just going to pick Lively at 10 if he were there. But this to me feels like a over prioritization of need, looking specifically at the center spot when their entire front court is the need, right? Like, yeah, they were bad all year, but when did things really, really fall apart? It's when they traded away Dorian Finney-Smith. And the year before that, they were a more than capable defense without a, good defensive center. I mean, it was Kleba and Finney-Smith carrying them in the front court on that end. So I do not like that pick from Dallas. So up next, we're going to have the Raptors at 13. What are you thinking, Logan, there?
The Raptors kind of luck out here and get their pick of the litter, man. This is a dream scenario. I think there's a lot of different directions they could go in. You could take Keontae George right here, who I love as upside as a star perimeter creator. The biggest need for Toronto is that half-court perimeter creation, I think, in shooting. You've got Nick Smith Jr. on the board, too, where they could go. You've got Jalen Hood-Schifino, who I think is a lead ball handler with legitimate upside as a pull-up jump shooter. So those are all directions I think they could go. But again, with Cam Whitmore hanging around here on the board, I would go with him. I think he's the best available, and I think you can figure out the guard situation later. Kobe Buffkin's another guy that I think you could go with if you're Toronto. I really like his scoring skill set. Whitmore to me is the best player available. I don't want to be a broken record, but I'd take him right here.
Yeah, 13 is a far slide for him, even not being as high on him as the consensus. I don't really understand it, and it's tough because Toronto is not the ideal landing spot for him, just when you consider what has been their approach to team building. Let's put together as many long athletes as we can and try to figure it out. And a lack of skill in the backcourt, of that high-level skill, shot creation, the kind of guy who is going to get you a good look every possession, has really plagued them. And I think is a huge reason that they regressed this past year. Like, turns out when Fred VanVleet is your best guard and you've got Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes out there, along with a Jakob Poeltl, like, that's your front court. You need really highly skilled players in the backcourt. And Cam Whitmore is not that to me. But I still think, is he in a different enough class from like a Keontae George? Probably. I really do like Keontae. I really like Grady Dick too. I mean, maybe Grady Dick is a guy you would look at and say his shooting and playmaking value, he can fit anywhere. He could certainly fit in Toronto. It would be ideal if they could get a more dynamic guard, though, where maybe you could look at a Keontae George, but he's just not the most complete, refined prospect. Talked about his struggles creating inside the arc, 42% on twos, because he's not a high-end athlete, not a guy who is going to consistently put pressure on the paint, has his upside as a playmaker, his great moments there, but also some lapses. Kobe Buffkin is a guy who I view in a similar tier overall, where he has some of those playmaking flashes. It's not always the most consistent from him. So I would be good with either one of those guys or Whitmore, because I think those two more fit a need. But Whitmore is the best prospect here, and I feel very decisive about that. Toronto is in an interesting position overall here, because you have Gary Trent now having opted in, but you have VanVleet hitting the market. I mean, what do you think this roster looks like next season? What are the next steps for them as they try to bounce back from a rough year?
You know, as we're seeing the Wizards finally make the decision to blow it up and go into their full rebuild, that's what I thought Toronto should last year. Almost get into the playoffs. They get into the play-in this year and lose. I thought what they should have done last year was deal VanVleet and Siakam before the deadline, before their contracts were up. So you lose VanVleet for basically nothing. I don't really see him returning to Toronto. I chop Siakam, man, before the market goes down. I just see what you could recruit. There's future first that you can get out of him. I still think Siakam's a really good big man. He's with his flaws, but one of the best offensive centers in basketball, can space the floor, can get downhill, can play make a little bit, can handle the ball a little bit, is a plus defender, is a hustler. So if I'm Toronto, I'd blow it up and I'd launch into the full rebuild, man. I'd chop Siakam, I'd chop Gary Trent Jr., if I'm being honest, and find guys that fit your timeline. It is weird because the majority of the assets on your roster that you would be building around, if you get Whitmore, is Scotty Barnes, a big wing who can't really shoot. Cam Whitmore, a big wing who can't really shoot, right? Like, there are some redundancies there, but you're young enough to where you just kind of go with it and you see what you can build. So if I'm Toronto, I would explore fully blowing it up this season, Carson. I think that's the right move, and I think you do it before it gets too late and you're not getting requisite value, or like you let Fred VanVleet walk for nothing, you let Siakam walk for nothing. You don't want to reach that point where you're not getting any assets for a star player. So if I'm Toronto, I'd take the best player available here and I'd blow it all up. What do you think they should do, though?
I do think they should ultimately take the best player available. The blow it all up thing is a tricky one, because there's a report today that Siakam wants to stay in Toronto and that he will potentially not be willing to re-sign with any team that trades for him, or not necessarily with the team that trades for him, which on an expiring deal, obviously you don't have any control of the asset that you're getting, makes it a lot tougher to swing that deal. But I just don't see this team with the current shape going where they want to go. And I think we've heard so much talk about trading OG Anunoby. To me, he's a more malleable piece. Siakam is obviously in a different class as a player, and I thought really took some strides this year with the level that he reached as a playmaker. And I think has continued to grow as a scorer from the intermediate area, some of the mid-range stuff. Siakam is really, really good, but he's funky. And Scotty Barnes is funky as hell. And all these guys together, right? These big, long, sort of unorthodox guys in the front court. Yeah, I'm not really buying that long term. So I think they would like to trade Siakam, but it's going to be a question of if the market is there. I think best player available makes sense here, and we're going to see what they do in a second. What's your take on Scotty Barnes, just as we're talking about young players who they've invested in, and this is a guy who won Rookie of the Year in a really stacked class. Is he the sort of foundational piece who you have a lot of confidence in being a building block?
Not offensive. I think that's where the big misconception about Scotty comes in. A lot of people, after he won Rookie of the Year, wanted to toot their own horns and I wanted him over Mobley because he won Rookie of the Year. He's better than Mobley, this and that. I think Scotty's a cool defensive asset. He's a cool defensive piece. He's a dog, but he's like a baby deer, man. Like when you see him move on offense, that's the best way I can describe it. Like you talk about him. He is funky, dude. He doesn't have a great handle. There's just a lack of fluidity with Scotty Barnes that I don't really love. So I don't ever know if he's a high-end perimeter creator. I don't know if I really trust his shot. His shot didn't really develop from year one to year two. And that was the most disappointing thing to me about Toronto and about Scotty Barnes was we didn't see that crazy offensive progression that we were really hoping for in year two. Is that a product of his situation not being conducive to winning, maximizing him as a playmaker because of a lack of shooting, or is it because of him as a player? I think personally it's a little of both. Carson, I don't really see him as a foundational piece offensively or defensively. I think he's a really good complementary wing that you have to build around. I don't think he's an offensive engine or a defensive anchor. I like him, but he is funky.
So the Raptors pick is in. They're taking Grady Dick. I do like this. Again, he was on the short list of guys who we named. Whitmore, to me, would have made the most sense as the best player available, but not the most intuitive fit. Grady Dick is a guy who works anywhere. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what Toronto does with that primary initiator spot that is wide open if they don't retain Van Vliet. And either way, Van Vliet is not the sort of high-end option that they would need to propel them into contention. But I'm a big fan of Grady Dick. I think he has one of the highest floors in this draft. I had him as my number 10 prospect on my big board. How do you feel about this for Toronto?
Yeah, he can fit anywhere. It's a good way of putting it. He helps them in terms of floor spacing and just pure shooting. He's a really crafty guy just because he lacks that elite athleticism that helps him get all the way down to the rim. So he has to be a little craftier. He's really good. My favorite things about him, using head fakes, jab steps, stuff like that to set up, get into the lane. And then his one dribble pull-up is absolutely disgusting. He looks a little bit like Michael Jackson tonight with that suit. He's styling. I like it.
Yeah, no, he's dripping.
But, yeah, Grady's pigeonholed into a little bit of a role as a secondary, tertiary ball handler, but he has some playmaking upside, decision-making upside, but he's a really good pure shooter. And in terms of just a need for Toronto, I think it's a good pick. They desperately needed some half-court creation and some floor spacing and shooting. So I don't hate the Grady Dick pick here. I think it's a good one.
So the last pick that we're going to be covering live here is this one now. The Pelicans will obviously continue to monitor the draft, throw out some tweets throughout the night, but this will be the end of our live coverage. The Pelicans are in an interesting spot, Logan, because there has been a lot of talk about potential Zion trades as of late, just with his inability to stay on the floor and apparently a just disconnect in terms of the organization with him in the front office, with him and his teammates, not really loving New Orleans, it seems. At the same time, this is a really talented basketball team and one that was able to win 42 games without Zion for a majority of the season. And when he was out there, he was playing like a top 15 player on the planet. Just remarkable efficiency offensively, insane downhill force, obviously, continued to show his playmaking. So how do they balance these two conflicting directions that they could go in, and who makes the most sense for them here?
Thing I want to hammer home, Carson, is that you don't want to give up on Zion Williamson that easy, in my opinion. Yeah, there's some disconnect. Yeah, there's some drama. He was one of the 10 best offensive players in basketball when he was on the court. And when you talk about the surrounding pieces here, I don't think they're far off. I think they need to be a lot better defensively. I don't know how to do that with two negative wing defenders in BI, in Zion. You do that with a negative, guard out there in McCollum. So I think there are a couple of ways. You go out and you get a bench wing defender. And, I mean, Herb Jones and Trey Murphy are good off the bench. I don't really think it's a position of need. That's the thing, man. It's frustrating that they're not that far off. I would take Keontae George. I like Cam Whitmore. I just think there's too many wings already here on this roster. The guard spot is of need for New Orleans. It's something that they've invested in a lot in these past couple years, too. Remember, they took Dyson Daniels. They took Kyra Lewis Jr. So you'd be going back to the well one more time here if you took Hood Schifino, if you took Bufkin, if you took Nick Smith Jr., or if you took Keontae George. But I think that's the spot you go. I would take Keontae, good shooter, good floor spacer, has perimeter star shot-making upside, in my opinion. So I'd go with Keontae, but I think the guard spot is probably where you focus. I don't know, man. I'm not ready to give up on Zion yet. I just think he's too talented and too dominant of a player when he is on the floor to just trade.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. At the same time, I wonder if we're going to reach a point where it's like sell high here. This is a guy who is so more often not on the floor than he is out there, and undeniably a generationally special basketball player, but you have to play basketball for that to matter. This roster is fascinating because I look at every position and I think, all right, they're doing pretty well. Like, of course, they do not have a sort of traditional point guard with CJ being the smallest guy in this starting five, but I thought CJ had like his best season as a playmaker. I think is still a star level guy. You look at the collection of wings, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, those dudes are both balling, especially Murphy because of his offensive ability, one of the best pure shooters in the league, but also a two-way weapon. BI has this incredible scoring and playmaking combination. Zion, obviously. Valanciunas is very good as that interior force, floor spacer, presence on the glass. So there's not really anything that I look at as being a glaring need. So I'm inclined to say that they should take the best player available. And I don't know that there's really a ton of room for Cam Whitmore here. Maybe it turns into a situation where you could try to flip him, but I guess he's not the prized asset that we felt like he was, that I think that he should be. There are a couple more guys who fit the win now window for them who you didn't mention. They could go with that archetype of like the sort of bucket getting first guard. I would prefer some more veteran established guys with winning traits. Chris Murray, who we've mentioned, Keegan Murray's twin, I think just immediately, yeah, you already have talented wings. You can't really have enough, in my opinion. That's a guy with a versatile offensive impact and who is going to help you on the defensive side of the ball. And then I think Jordan Hawkins would be intriguing here because of his pure shooting value, a guy who does not need the ball in his hands a lot to completely grease the wheels of an offense, to be highly efficient. To me, the best pure shooting prospect in this class, and a guy who can just do so much coming off screen, spotting up, one of the most active off-ball movers I can think of seeing as a prospect. I just don't think you're getting like that playmaker or, the sort of five who could replace Valanciunas in this range. So we'll see what the Pelicans do at 14 here. Adam Silver walked up and then he went away on my screen and now he's back. I think they should still continue to push for this win now window for what it's worth. Like, they have so much talent. And it is Jordan Hawkins, who I just mentioned at the end there. I like that. I mean, Hawkins again, is a win now player. This is a guy who just won a national title at UConn and just makes anybody anywhere better, because shooters like that, especially with the level of off-ball activity, don't come around. 39% from deep, almost 88% from the line. How do you feel about this pick, Logan?
Yeah, I like it. They need floor spacing. They need a bench scoring presence. And I think they get it in Jordan Hawkins. Not only is he a great off-ball relocator, Carson, I feel like every clip you watch of Hawkins, he is running around off of a screen or moving to get to open space. He's got a lightning quick release too, dude, and it's really high. Like, it's hard to block. He gets it up quick. And in terms of other things that he brings to the offense too, man, when you think about a rim collapser like Zion Williamson, another scorer, other guys are going to have a lot of attention, which opens up the floor for Hawkins, not only as a shooter, but as a closeout attacker on Hill, man. He's a good athlete, not a crazy handle, but a good enough athlete where he can attack closeouts at a high level and get them. So, man, I'm really surprised, Carson, that Cam Whitmore dropped this much and is still available here at 15. But I don't hate the Hawkins pick. I think he's a really talented off the bench in a position of need for the Pelicans.
Dude, I agree with you on the Cam Whitmore point. That is going to be the story to track here. You look at the Hawks at 15. I mean, would they take a dynamic downhill wing with a potential high two-way ceiling? I would certainly think so. But we'll see who it ends up being, who actually takes a stab at Cam Whitmore. To me, clearly the best prospect left on the board. And a very interesting lottery overall, Logan, as it always is. So it has been so much fun doing this live with you. Of course, huge thanks to Colin and Jason for coming on earlier. That was a ton of fun for the first 3 picks. Huge shout out to our live producer for this, Ryan Brumley, to our buddy Mitch Anderson, who's been helping out with some live graphics. Thanks all you guys for making this possible. And thanks to everybody who watched along with us. If you enjoyed, please subscribe to the Volume YouTube page. You can find all our content there. You can also listen to our podcast across audio platforms. You can find us on social media, TikTok, Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can get some of our cool new merch like this hat, like that flag behind us, at the Volume store. So as always, appreciate your guys' support. I've been Carson Breber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.